do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., and me, Mr. Bobby, as your co-host. Welcome. Today being July the 7th, we are 9 a.m. in the eastern part of the concept called the United States. To get in contact with the show, to be a participant, call this number, 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button and you will go to the head of the line, and you will be next when Mr. Fuller finishes answering a question. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, at gmail.com, and you will go to the bottom of the list because there are almost 100 ahead of you, so it'll be some time before I will get to them or your email, but at some point in time, some show, I will get to it unless my people forward one to me. With that being said, let the show begin. Mr. Fuller, good morning, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
All right, Mr. Fuller. Let's get right into it. This is from, I guess his name is William. Says this: on the back of your books, you state in your 5th bullet that, quote, the people who have the ability to eliminate racism do not have the will to do so, and the people who have the will to do so do not have the ability, end of quote. What is the meaning with examples of people with ability and those who do not have ability, and why is this so?
The white supremacists.
And he says, lastly, where can one find the data that supports your answer? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
In a system of white supremacy, which is absolute, that's the absolute government of the planet, they have the ability to change that system into a system of justice at any time that they see fit. Why? Because they have the power. So that's the logic behind it. The people who want it more than anybody are the victims of it, the victims of the system of racism. But they don't have the ability. They don't have the competence. That's how they became victims in the first place, not knowing what to do about it when it first started and not attending to it for whatever reason there might have been. But they do have the desire that it would be changed because we all say so. I'm one of them who says so, that we should have a system of justice rather than a system of racism as the basic functional government of the people of this planet. A system of justice theoretically would be better than a system of racism, which is based on dominating and mistreating people based on color. So the reason for that statement is the people who have the ability don't have the will, and the people who have the will don't have the ability. And the people who have the will, meaning black people, the non-white people of the planet, we're not able to change the system of racism and rather eliminate it and replace it with a system of justice. We don't have that ability. We're not competent enough to do that. The racists can. They have the greatest amount of knowledge and understanding of what they have put together. So anything that people put together, the people who put it together logically speaking, can take it apart instantly because they know more about how it's put together than anybody else. That's the logic.
Okay, and then he wanted to know, where did you get the data to support what you're saying?
You mean the evidence?
Yes.
The evidence is self-evident. Anyone who manufactures a car knows more about manufacturing cars and how to take that car apart than someone who doesn't know. They have just been a passenger in a car. They have seen a car, or watch a car go by, or whatever, but they didn't have anything to do with putting it together. So it's logic that anyone who can put something together knows more about how to take it apart than someone who doesn't know anything about it except being run over by a car. Like the system of white supremacy runs over black people. Black people know that they have been run over by something called a car in the form of racism. But the people who are driving the car and who produce the car, they do the running over, the car, the tank, or the vehicle. Racism is a vehicle for getting things done. They know more about it. That's self-evident.
Mm-hmm.
That's the logic.
All righty. Next question here. Hello, Mr. Fuller. Since the system of white supremacy still exists, what tangibles are needed besides the code to eliminate white supremacy? Think of the code as a hammer and the tangibles as the knowledge, nails, wood, glue, etc., needed to build the house. Please be specific.
Well, I don't know if I made that analogy. The person who is making these statements probably could make the analogy, but what I did was just simply wrote out what I thought was the beginning of a code of thought, speech, and action, what to think about, how to speak about it, what words to use. That's why there's a word guide there, too, in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. That those are the specifics. First thing you do when you get ready to do anything is analyze what the problem is that you're trying to solve. The problem is something called racism and or white supremacy. That's the problem. So you look at the problem and say, now, how is this problem put together? How was it instituted? What does it consist of on a daily basis in all 9 areas of activity? Economics, how does it work? How does it work in education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war? How is this problem instituted? And you look at it, you study it, and see how it works on a daily basis. Look at the economics of it, how time and energy is used. Education, starting with how words are used, because in order to be educated, usually in most cases, a lot of words are used along with the action to demonstrate what the words mean. So you study that.
Mm-hmm.
The system of racism is put together just like you put together a house or a vehicle or a boat. It just, you study every part, that's all of the parts that make a boat, you might say, using that analogy, makes the part, all of the parts that makes a boat, a boat. The system of racism is the same thing. It's an activity. It's how you control people and all of the things that you do to control people. Starting with whips and chains, and then, last but not least, you start, after you get a person whipped into submission and chained into submission, then you start working on the person's mind. And that's called enslavement. Or if it's done on the basis of color, it's called racism.
Okay. Let's see here. Thank you. American Indian Truth has joined the conversation in the chat room. Thank you very much. Next question here. Mr. Fuller, using your definition in the word guide, should we be masters of money? And what are some of the most important things that non-white people do have or do not have that white supremacists do have that enable the code of white supremacy to dominate and remain supreme over your or any other code?
If I understand the question, it's the will. Codes are that's just a word that points to how to go about getting something done. That's all a code is. You want to do something. So the first thing that you have is the will to do what it is you want to do. Some people who are classified themselves as white decided, and sometimes in the past, that what they wanted to do was classify people according to color, and then if you were classified as white, you would be supreme over people who are classified as people of color. So it would be white dominating people who are considered to be non-white and enslaving them and having those people do their will. A very simple formula, one of the most simple and powerful formulas for government, if not the most, in recorded history. Very efficient in its simplicity. It's not complicated at all. So if I understand that question, it's just the will.
Okay.
And now the people who are dominated didn't have the will to keep from being dominated. They were too busy fighting each other for the most part about tribes and this and that and the other, symbols and signs and abstract things, like modern black people in the northwestern hemisphere fight about, what neighborhood you're in or whatnot, or do you look better than I do today, or who's ugly and who's pretty, or just anything that they can find to fight about.
Okay.
And that's basically, and that includes the people of color who are called Indians, tribal, my little group, my little family unit, whatever it is, and they find reasons to fight about that.
Yes.
The white supremacists thought on a bigger level. They had the will to take over the entire world based on color, while everybody else was fighting about little trivial things.
Yes, sir.
Like we still do.
Don't forget that when you call in at 516-453-9921, be sure to give the screener your name so I can properly introduce you. Okay, Mr. Fuller, this comes from Gregory. He says this, Mr. Bobby, could you please ask Mr. Fuller what will become of the black female vagina and the black female in relation to the black male if the white male anus becomes what he predicts that he will be? Also, will this result in the reduction and or the gradual elimination of the black population in the world?
Well, in answer to the last question, reducing the black population of the world, they do that on an ongoing basis anyway. So it's just called control. It's called racial population.
Yes.
Right, reduction and control. And so they're not trying to, a lot of people say that the white supremacists want to eliminate all of the people of color from the planet. If they wanted to do that, they'd have done that a long time ago. Who's going to stop them? Who has that kind of muscle? Nobody. We'd just be gone, that's all. In 40 days or whatever schedule they choose to do it. just blow us all up, and have the entire planet to themselves. They don't want to do that. You know why? If you're in the horse racing racket, would you destroy all of your horses? So the white supremacists, like, you know, they'll get their fun, their glory, their material comfort out of dominating and mistreating people who have color in their skin by making servants out of them, reducing them to an animal-like state, which is what we're in. If we admit to the truth, we act like we're just as crazy, you know, wild animals, because, you know, so that's what you do. You corral them after you make them into being what you want them to be, because then you can control them. They don't have any sense of themselves. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing, so you crack the whip over and make them do whatever it is you want them to do, since they don't have a plan of their own. So that's what they have done to the darker people of the entire planet. They just crack the whip. Do this, do that. Go here, go there, because you ain't got sense enough to do anything on your own except fight and jump up and down and spin around on your head and all like that. I mean, but anything constructive is left to us. So we do everything that's constructive. You don't do anything. You don't have that black person do anything that has anything to do with anything constructive. Now, something that's stupid and silly, turn it all over to them. We'll keep a little bit for ourselves, but not enough to damage us.
Okay.
That's the philosophy, and it worked very well.
Alrighty. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. And if you'd like to get in contact with the show, just dial this number, 516-453-9921, or you can Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Also, there's a chat room you could go to. This is before I get to you, Joshua. There's a chat room available. And in the chat room, American Indian Truth says this, Mr. Fuller: no one's skin color is black or white. I think Mr. Fuller is more interested in maintaining the status quo and not change. If he was interested in change, he would teach us to drop misnomers like black, colored, Negro, etc., and embrace our indigenousness. The Rights Act of 1968, Public Law 90-284, was written for American Indians, not colored, Negroes, etc. Okay. All righty. Well, that was from American Indian Truth from the chat room. You can also do that. Get me in the chat room. 804 Big Leagues 82 is in the room also. Thank you. Let's go to Joshua. Let me see, Josh, if I can get you in here. Okay, Joshua, you are worldwide with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, okay. You can be heard.
I just had one question and then one example of my question.
If they're both quick, because we're backed up, so go ahead, please, sir. Okay.
Yeah, really quickly, Mr. Fuller. I was wondering if you could break down for me again how the support of white supremacists supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, getting documentation and statues are being removed. And you spoke about a removal of evidence, I believe. And my quick example is right here in Washington, D.C., George Preston Marshall. His statue was removed at the RFK Stadium. And he was once quoted, I believe, as saying that, he would sign a black player when the Harlem Globetrotters signed a white player. And I wanted to know if you could break that down for us, why removing that evidence could be linked, if that makes sense.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
The people who are taking them down can explain that. I'm not moving any statues. So I'm not, that's the codified way. Whomever is saying something or doing something, these are the people to ask. Now, my view of it is that they're doing what they're doing. That's what the code requires me to say. White people say take them down. Some white people say no, leave them up. Some black people say leave them up, a few. And some black people say take them down. So the people who are in the mix of doing all of this, they can give their own reasons for why this and why that. I have in the textbook, I say that wherever you have flags or statues and you have controversy about them, controversy means there are question marks. So I say that that's a universal symbol. And so you can just put question marks as an addition to any flag or any statue anywhere. Just put a question mark there as an opener. If you have a certain flag flying on a flag pole, or right up under it, put another flag that you can see through, but it has a question mark on it. This is described in the textbook for victims of racism. And therefore, that question mark, like the end of a sentence, will be right there on that same flagpole under the flag. You don't take the flag down. That's my suggestion. That's my view. If people are having controversy about it. In other words, some people say leave it up. Other people say take it down. I say, well, you have a compromise, in a compensatory way. Try to be reasonable. Say, since it's a controversy, nobody can agree whether it can stay up or come down, and everybody seems to be in conflict about it. You try to reduce conflict, so you put a question mark by the statue or around the statue, or a series of question marks if you want to. What is it about? And let whomever sees the statue or the flag determine. Since it's just an object, it's not a real person, that does anything. People are supposed to have mastery over something like a flag or something like a statue, which a lot of people may even consider to be idolatry, to have any kind of statues to anything or any kind of pictures of anything. Some people will call that idolatry if you get all caught up in that. So the compensatory way is, until it's all settled by a majority of whomever were involved in putting them up or taking them down, just put a question mark on it, up under it, or around it, or a series of question marks, and let people make up their own minds about what the value is in it or what the value is not, what it's supposed to be about, whom is it supposed to be addressing. Everybody who comes by can look and make up their own minds. That's whether it's a statue of Martin Luther King or a statue of Robert E. Lee. If you want to, just put a question mark around it, and everybody can answer their own questions about what they have, of what value it is or what the devalue is, if you're into statues. I'm not into statues of any kind.
All righty. Thank you, Brother Joshua, and again, don't be a stranger to the program, so we call back. Thank you for your call. Brother Moon Pie is in the house. Thank you, Brother Moon Pie. This comes from Tez Wiki. Mr. Fuller, he says, is it correct to think of racist man and racist woman as animals as they are running an animal system devoid of justice bearing in mind that animals cannot think about justice.
Well, I don't call the white supremacists animals because I don't call people animals, because the popular term for an animal is something like a giraffe or an alligator or a dog or a cat. And so that's how the word is usually used, the word animal. That's how it's applied. So words are just tools. So it comes down to what is the intention of the tool that you're using? Is it to make someone happy, make someone sad, make someone angry? Is it a scientific way of expressing something, and you explain it within that context? So a word is just a tool. So I don't call the white supremacists animals because they say that they are people. They are people who believe in white supremacy. And so, since that's what they call themselves, the code says you always call people by the names and or titles that they want to be called.
No name calling them.
No name calling. That's one of the 10 stops. Never call anybody by any name under any circumstance except the name that person wants to be called. Even if that person is calling you by a name that you don't want to be called, you still call that person by the name that person wants to be called. That's the codified way. That's something that is recommended in the textbook, and be consistent about it at all times, no exceptions to that rule at all. Always call every person by the name and or title that person wants to be called, even if the person changes his or her name 4 and 5 times every day. I mean, before coffee in the morning or whatever, that person's name might say, well, call me Priscilla. And after 9 o'clock, call me Agnes. Now, you might think that's absurd, but call people by the names that they want to be called if you want to interact with people in a constructive manner, which victims of racism should always want to do or say the most constructive thing that can possibly be said or done. So you always want to show that that's what you intend to do. Your intentions are always to be constructive. Now, other people can be what they choose to be. And that includes people who call you by names that you don't want to be called, including the N-word. You still call that person Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith. And they're calling you by the N-word. A lot of black people will say, no way I can live with that. That hurts my heart. Oh, that kills me. Oh, I'll die. No, you won't. It shows that you are beginning to gain power, but you don't even understand probably that that's what that means. That you have complete control over words. You don't let words motivate you to do anything. You motivate other people by the words that you choose to use, not by having them jerk you around by the latest word that they have come up with. No, not supposed to ever act like that.
Okay.
Every black person is supposed to be the master of words. Don't ever let a word master you. I don't care what kind of word it is.
Okay, and with that being said, let's do this. Let's start my music, please. Bill from New York, I'll be right with you. Listen to this warp. Thank you for calling, or for in the chat. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you know the numbers, but I'll repeat them anyway. 516-453-9921. And be sure to press the number 1 button, and you will go right up to where you need to be. I have no control over that, but it places you where you need to be. If you would like to Gmail me, you may. Bear in mind that it will probably not be read today, but I'm not sure on that. But The address is numero 7, Mr. Bobby at gmail.com, and at some point it will be read. I just may not know when. Okay, and some people are chatting with me, and occasionally I will get down there. Gorp, Jacoby 2, Kane 2, or Jacob. I'm very bad at pronouncing names, but thank you for all the listeners. Thank you for the callers that are online. Again, Moon Pie is making Mr. Fuller and myself looking good, along with Brother Robert. Okay, let's do this here, if I can get you in here. Let's go to the Dollar Bill, like I know him for real. Dollar Bill
Good morning,
from New York. New York. Go ahead, Bill. You're on Worldwide. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby, and good morning, Mr. Fuller. Just wanted to ask you, my first question, I wanted to ask, using your definition in the word guide, your word guide, should we be masters of money? And what are some of the most important things that non-white people do not have, that white supremacists do have, that enable the code of white supremacy to dominate and remain supreme over your code and any other code?
The will. I mentioned this earlier, just a few minutes ago. The will. Adolf Hitler, during his era, I understand, talked about some of the scholars, the Nazi scholars of Nazism, which is a form of racism. They say the triumph of the will. That's what I'm thinking about. I think there was a movie made in Germany at that time. W-I-L-L. Willpower. In other words, look around at the world and figure out what you are supposed to be doing while you are here on what they call the planet Earth. And so the white supremacists, if I can stay focused on your question, had the will to say, we are not going to be fooling around with a whole bunch of little trivial stuff, talking about my tribe and this type of stuff. We're going to dominate everything, kick everybody out of the way over the entire planet who doesn't submit to our will. And we will be a certain type of people who will dominate and master over other people. And so it's the will. So the original white supremacists, whomever they were, came up with an idea called white supremacy, and they say it will mean that we will have everything concentrated on, all of our educational system, our monetary system, everything that we do will be connected with the will to dominate people of color in every area of activity, every minute of every day, wherever we happen to be. That will be our entire philosophy of life, and we will prosper from it. We will get from that all of the things that all people want, but we will get it on a massive scale, bigger than anybody has ever done it, and it will be what? The things that everybody wants, and that is fun, glory, and material comfort. And we will be the best at it that anybody has ever been. And as it turned out, so far, when they put that formula to work on the basis of color, which is just a form of royalism, which basically that's the model that is built on, holier than thou, a category of people who are supposed to be supreme over all other people, that's what they did. And they call it white supremacy and or racism. And it turned out to be the most powerful force, political force and religious force, ever put into practice by the people of the planet Earth.
Thank you.
In recorded
Thank
history.
You for that. Yes, sir. So what is the masters of money? Should we be the masters of money?
We can't be the masters of money until we are masters of ourselves. and stop the kind of priority that we have. What is black people's priority? We want to do just enough to show off to other black people. I say this almost on every program because this is where our biggest weakness is. Black people who are out here drive-by shooting. What is that really about? Showing off. Showing off to whom? Each other. If you notice, all the black people that go to these, like we just had, July the 4th, they go to these gatherings, everybody hugging and fist pumping and all of this, and then the shooting breaks out, and some 13-year-old girl halfway down the block, skipping rope, she's shot in the head. That's black people among ourselves. But what is it really all about? It's showing off. You passed by about 15 white playgrounds in that car with your homies. I'm talking to the people who are doing this type of stuff and analyzing it for what it really is. You went all through one side of town to another side of town because you heard there was a party going on over there. And that party, you made sure that party was a party of black people, people that looked just like yourself. So you went over there, passed by a whole bunch of white playgrounds, see, which goes to show you what your intent is right there. Now, you're not just looking for playgrounds. You're looking for a specific playground or a specific place where there are non-white people, people that look like yourself, mostly. In fact, you're just hungry for that. You're starving for that. And that's why you do it. So that's a form of what? Showing off. Now, people who don't have anything in their existence to do other than show off your new tattoo, your new hairdo, your new way of shooting into a crowd, all right, and then jumping in a car and tearing down the street and hoping that no white people are trying to catch you, because if they are on you, that's when it really gets serious. See what I mean? If it's some white people who are trying to catch you, now it's really serious. And you know it's serious with your black selves. Tearing up everything among black people, but when the white supremacists show up, now it's demonstration time. You want all those black people that you are shooting at to come out and help you. You shouldn't get any help from anybody, including your mother and grandmother. They should say, look, I don't know you. Don't come back here ever doing that kind of foolishness. Don't ever set foot in this house again. Now that, maybe I'm stretching it a bit on the question, but I'm saying this is the way the code goes with it.
Yes,
Every black grandmother who has a grandson out here drive-by shooting should let him know, if your name is ever connected with anything like that, don't you ever set foot in here again. And she can do it with tears in her eyes, but she can make that clear.
Made it
You're
clear.
not welcome here. Go and hang out with the grandmothers of that bunch that you're running with. And go over there and live on their front porch. Because you're not welcome here. Not in my basement, not nowhere.
Thank you, Dollar Bill from New York. Don't be a stranger. Don't be a stranger.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry to cut you off on the end. Baisha, before I get to you, we finally got to you, Baisha. Question came up on the chat room, Mr. Fuller. It says this, Vorp says this, where did the idea white is supposed to be superior to all others come from? I missed the memo. Nobody told me white is supposed to be superior. Something to say about that, and he's speaking about these boys raised without fathers, and I'm reading it just the way he wrote it. They was never taught how to get along by a man. The mothers have made them little sissies that throw tantrums and solve their problems with violence. A child requires both mother and father. Women cannot do it. Women cannot do it alone. What do you say about that, Mr. Fuller?
Well, there was a lot of statements made in there, and so if the question
well, the first question was the idea white is supposed to be superior to all others. Where did that come from?
Came from the white people who decided that that's what they were going to do. The white supremacists. Otherwise, we wouldn't have white supremacy. So, logically speaking, it came from somebody who was classified as white. People who classified themselves as white and classified other people as being non-white, people of color. And it turned out, like I've said over and over again, and what my books are about, to be the most powerful political and religious idea in recorded history that was actually put into practice. Nothing has been more powerful than that. No government has ever been more powerful than the system of white supremacy in recorded history.
In recorded history. Okay. All righty. All right. See, Baisha, she's also called Layla. Let me do this. I'm going to put these all in one question, Mr. Fuller. She says, first of all, peace. Is there an ancient evil at the root of the current white supremacy? And if so, is there a human spiritual system that can end white supremacy? And is there a geological location that black people occupy to escape this current white supremacy system? Thank you.
You start from where you are. In answer to the last question, the victims of racism can't be somewhere where they are not. So you start right from where you are, and you start by doing what? Instituting a code, like I just mentioned a few elements a while ago. You don't take part in any kind of celebration, period. Now, this hurts black people. A lot of things that I'm recommending according to the code, because I'm doing it not to be hurtful, but to say if we're going to solve the problem, we're going to have to be a serious people, which we have been taught not to be serious about serious things. We have been systematically taught by the white supremacists as black people to be super serious about everything that's silly and super silly about everything that's serious. If you want some foolishness, look for some black people because they love it. Anything that's stupid and silly, running around with a whole bunch of, just doing a whole bunch of nothing, running around in a circle, yelling and screaming about this and not serious about anything at any time that calls for something that is serious, unless you're just holding their feet to the fire. That's the kind of people we want them to be. We encourage that. And they have bought into it. So, in answer to the question, we need a code like we've never had before. A code that saves. No celebrations. That's painful. Black people, Mardi Gras time. What are you talking about, no celebrations? I got a daughter that's going to have a birthday party. Well, the code says you don't have but one birthday. That's number one. We need a new way of thinking altogether. We need to just get all the stuff out of our minds that we got there now and put some new stuff there that's much more powerful and much more progressive. That means giving up huge parts of what we call black culture. Why? Because it's a failed culture, that's why. Nobody should wish black culture on anybody at any time if you look at all of the elements of black culture. Because what is culture? Culture is what you do. That's all any culture is. The white supremacists have the strongest, most powerful culture that the world has ever seen. We need to study that and figure out how we have this raggedy culture that we have, and they have a powerful culture that everybody bows down to.
So, in answer to the first question she asked, is there an ancient evil at the root of the current white supremacy system, your answer would be what?
Yes.
Okay. And then the middle question, is there a human spiritual system that can end white supremacy?
Yes.
Okay.
A human spiritual system? Yes. You start believing in humanity. And you have a spirit and a code, because a spirit takes a body that's moving in order to do something. We all understand that, I hope. That you can have a spirit, but that spirit has got to work through a body. The body has hands, feet, a brain. So you come up with a code, like the white supremacists came up with a code for domination. We need a code for justice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the formula.
Okay. All righty. It is at this time, 46 minutes after the hour, or 14 before the 10 o'clock hour, that we pause just for a few moments to have Mr. Fuller speak about his book. As far as I know, according to the sources that I get the information from, the book is doing very well. Thank you. Mr. Fuller thanks you, and I thank you. The book is doing very well. They do have ample supplies. I believe that you can get it. I'll tell you what, Mr. Fuller will tell you to go to Produce Justice. You can go there and get all the information you need. Mr. Fuller, take it away about your book.
Yes, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the books that are there. There's a basic book, 2016 edition, an update from the 1984 edition, which is also there. But the recommended book is the 2016 edition, which covers most of what's in the 1984 edition. It's an updated version so that people don't get confused. The compensatory counter-racist code, you'll see that at the website producejustice.com. And then there's another volume, an extension to the 2016 edition, is the Word Guide that came out in 2010. It preceded the 2016 edition of the basic book. And this Word Guide shows you how to use words, how not to use words, what questions to ask when other people use words, and some instructions or suggestions, you might say, about how to react when certain words are used, what to say about them, what questions to ask about. Lots of questions, because all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. So when people use certain words, you have to, or should, know to ask questions about what the word means. Don't assume that you know what the word means when somebody else is using the word, because they may have a different definition of that word. But you can get all of these volumes by going to producejustice.com.
All righty. Producejustice.com.
And
okay,
they're for
listen.
victims. They're for the individual victims of racism. That's what the books are written for.
Yes, sir. Okay. Listen, let me remind everybody, thank you again for your participation and for your calls. I do appreciate that, and for your chats. Vorp and I have been chatting. And Jacoby to be King, yeah, we got your VGQ. Listen, when you call in, the number, which is 516-453-9921, my producers have asked me to ask you, please, ma'am, please, sir, when you do that, if you want to speak with Mr. Fuller, make sure you press the number 1 button after you call in. That way we can get you in some sequential order, and I can know your name and all that. And be sure to give him your name also. Please, ma'am, please, sir, be sure to give him your name. Okay. Let's see here. Before I get to Joe, JR said this, Mr. Fuller. He said on our 526 episode, he said it was probably the best ever at Mr. Fuller at explaining the concept of developing a code for the individual. Share it. But I've learned you can only lead a horse to water. Drinking is up to the horse. Okay, JR. It was read. With that, we're going to go to Joe. Let me get you up here, Joe. Okay, Joe, you are heard worldwide with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller.
Hey, Joe.
First, the ProduceJustice.com isn't working. I guess the usual suspects is interfering.
You say they're not working?
It's not working. I put it in the URL or whatever. It's not working.
Okay, I'll have the producer get on that. Just to be clear, the Produce Justice is not working as far as when you tried it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My producers, you heard that, so let's give me some feedback on that for the producers. Go ahead, Joe, with your question for Mr. Fuller.
My question is, can white people be victims of white supremacy?
No. White people can, according to the code, white people can be victims of non-justice, but a white person, by definition, cannot be a victim of white supremacy. There's no way that they have to be non-white. To be a victim of white supremacy, you have to be non-white. But you can be mistreated. You can be mistreated by another white person. But that's not white supremacy. They're not mistreating you on account of you're white. So that has nothing to do with white supremacy. The white supremacist system is a gangster system. And gangsters prey on each other, like the Corleone family against the Barzinas in what you call that fictional movie. That's a classic, they call it. And so gangsters do fight among themselves about what? About who's going to have the most say-so over the non-white people. So they do this. They have their conflicts, but they usually come out shaking hands at the end, like, so-called civil wars and all that type of thing. And they say, okay, well, you got the best of this argument about how the business is going to be run. This is the family business. But they do mistreat each other on a huge scale, slaughter each other about how they're going to go about dominating and mistreating the non-white people of the planet. But they are not victims of white supremacy. No white person can be a victim of white supremacy. That's the family business, white supremacy. So it's non-white. That's why they classify people as being non-white, people of color, including a whole lot of people who look like white people. If they're running short of people, they'll just classify some of them as non-white. All right? There's a lot of black people who look like they're white people. But the white supremacists don't care about that type of thing. That's to confuse the victims. These are arguments that victims have among themselves, which the white supremacists always fuel these type of arguments. Anytime some non-white people are having a feud or dispute or going at each other about anything, the white supremacists cheer that on. They'll support that in a minute. Why? Because people who are fighting among themselves are easier to control when Big Daddy and Big Mama come around. And Big Daddy and Big Mama are always white. All right, children, get back to your little cages. Stop all this fussing. You're bad for business. You're disturbing my sleep. You're disturbing whatever it is I'm doing. And that's how we are treated, because that's how we act, and that's how we really are, because they have made us that way. They're very efficient people, the most efficient that the world has ever seen.
All righty. Joe, thank you for calling. Do not be a stranger to the program. Note here, the producer did speak with me, and they said that the website Produce Justice is up and running. Let's see, there were some storms in some parts of America that may have caused some shortage problems, but the site producejustice.com is working. Okay. And also want to give a special note to Wayne from Denmark. Yes, this show goes worldwide, and Wayne from Denmark, he's listening. Thank you, Wayne. Be aware, Wayne, that I bring that up in particular because when I wrote this morning, I wrote about the Congo Conference of 1884-85 under Bismarck, when the concept of the continent of Africa was divided by 14 nations, and Denmark was one of those nations. Yeah, that was the Congo Conference of 1884-1885. That was not mentioned in our history books, but that might be something you might want to listen to. Okay, let's see here. Let me see here. We got D Money. I'm going to get to you. Bill, I'm going to get to you. We have about 4 minutes left in this segment, so I don't want to stop that and then we have to stop. But I will do this one quickly here. This is from Daryl. He writes in all the time. He says, Mr. Fuller, I keep hearing callers bring up North Sentinel Island as one place where white supremacists got no reign. Is that true? This is an island of black people with very distinct features who are part of some of the original people on the planet right in the Bay of Bengal, hundreds of miles away from India. They've been there for over 60,000 years, unlike other indigenous people who welcome in outsiders. They don't. Every white Christian missionary who's tried entering their island, sending in pigs, bananas, etc., catch arrows to the chest and buried right on the land. These people are not to be messed with. That's just how protective they are of their culture and way of life. So, yeah, white supremacist military could swoop over and drop a bomb, but that won't happen because North Sentinel Island is protected by India, which is a U.S. ally. It's also happened because dropping bombs or whatever else you could set off another tsunami in the region, which would also devastate part of the white supremacist economy. So I'm proud. So I say, let's be proud, and I know you say, as we black people shouldn't be proud about anything until we solve white supremacy. But be proud that there is a group of black people on the planet who are still intact and in their original form, who ain't been poisoned by the white supremacists. I don't care if they don't have all the technology, fashion sense, and can't speak English. They're living the way that most black people would have in one form or the other. Daryl, that's all I could read because we're up against the end of the first hour. But thank you for your VGQ. Thank you for writing in. Thank you, callers, for listening to the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Stay tuned for the second hour coming up in about 5 seconds. You are listening to, and welcome, you are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. And if you'd like to get in contact with the show, call this number or dial this number, 516-453-9921, and be sure to press the number 1 button so that you can go to the head of the line and give the call screener your name so that I can properly introduce you. If you don't want to do that, you can Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, and at some point, maybe not in this show, probably not in this show, I will read your Gmail at some point. You can also get on a chat with me, as a few have. Daryl Reeves is there. Jacoby 2, Kane 2 is there. Vorp is there. And others have been there, in addition to those that are on the phone. So here we go with the second hour. And let me see here. Let me go down to, I think he's next in line. This person's next in line. Let me see here. D-Money, gotcha. You're on, and you can be heard worldwide. Good morning, and what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby, and good morning, Mr. Fuller. I have like a theoretical question. I hope you can answer it, Mr. Fuller. I understand that a system of justice hasn't fully been instituted as of yet, but here's my question. In a system of justice, how do you deal with the problem, the scourge of deception and violence?
Well, in a system of justice, you don't deceive people. That's the whole point in having a system of justice. It all comes down to the will of the people who are going to be involved in a new system. That comes down to the will. If the people don't have the will, it's not going to happen anyway. If people still want to do the same things that we've been doing, we might as well keep what we got, which is chaos and misery, and just keep getting more of it. But if we're contending we'd like to see something different from what we're used to, then you have to have the will to do it. It's not going to happen without the will. That's what codification is about. You start eliminating everything that's non-constructive and bringing in everything that is constructive. That's the key. Very simple. Not complicated at all. But you have to have the will to do it. If you want to hold on to the old ways, you might as well just keep white supremacy. Just have people just constantly figuring out a way to mistreat people. That's nothing new. That's been around like forever. So we are very used to that. So if we want something different, we have to do different. And we have to have a code in order to help us do it. A code means what? Certain things you do, certain things you don't do. That's all a code is. So that you always produce a result that's going to be of constructive value. Nothing non-constructive. The world is not used to it. But we have to get used to some things that we're not used to at all. I mean, we'll feel miserable about doing it because a lot of the things that we're just used to doing, people, if you're used to having a nail in your shoe and you walk around with it year after year, anything that removes that nail, it begins to feel peculiar. You know, you're having like a drug addict getting withdrawal. You want to go right back into the thing you're trying to get away from. And that's how we have gotten on this planet. Most of the people on the planet. We're just as poison and unfit to be on this planet as people can be. And that includes white and non-white people. Nobody is anywhere close to the way that people ought to be. Nobody. There's no system that's set up that's the way it ought to be. Nowhere on this planet. We've nowhere reached our potential. According to what? According to what standard? A standard that's never been set. We have to set a very, very high standard for ourselves and for the people of this planet. One that just goes into infinity almost, because that's what we really need now. A completely another world. I mean, everything completely strange to us because we're not used to any of it. We need to go just that far for where we are now, which nothing is working now in the interaction between the people of this planet like it should be or like it could be. So we think about things that we've never even thought about before. That's the way we should be going.
It seems as though one of the things to think about would be the constructive versus non-constructive
That's how you start.
deception and violence. That would be the next question. Like, what's constructive about deception? What's constructive about violence? Because once you institute those questions, it seems like people think that it's a given, and that's always been my issue.
Oh, sure. People think that because we've been trained to think that, and trained basically in the modern days by the white supremacists. They glorify violence. Everything that you see glorifies violence. All of the heroes are violent people. Just recently, during this pandemic, they've been saying, wait a minute, you have nurses that are nurturing people. I mean, are these heroes? Sheroes? And the answer is yes. That's what it should have been about in the first place. You never honor somebody who's in the business of killing. But the white supremacists have spread it all over the world. Oh, man, killing is fun. Man, I mean, hey, get another gun. I mean, get 2 or 3 of them. Get 2,000 or 3,000 of them. Fill up the garage with them, and then the basement, and then all the houses up and down the street. And then if you can't do anything else with them, can't shoot them right, shoot off these guns right away. I mean, just show them off. Have gun shows and whatnot. Oh, yes, any type of weapon. Have all of your heroes. Make statues to them. But make sure that they're all killers. You make statues to killers, not the nurses. Mm-hmm. I mean, some nurse, she gets some little statue, hidden back in some forest behind some trees. You don't make a shero or a hero out of that person. No. See, so you're correct. Get rid of all of that stuff where you glorify violence. Get rid of it. Gangsterism. Black people, even when we're out there demonstrating Black Lives Matter and whatnot, then at some point, hey, we got to tear down something. And then be begging to get a job in that same place that I tore down last week. We're just as crazy as we can be, and we don't even know it. That's another big part of it. We are insane people. The white supremacists are insane with the way that they run the world. They're proving that. And their victims are doubly insane. So we just have some wasted people. We're a disgrace to a creator, any kind of creator. A half-drunk creator we are a disgrace to. And when I say we, I'm talking about all of us.
Mm-hmm. All right. D-Money, thank you again for your question.
Thank you.
Don't be a stranger and call back. Don't be a stranger here. I kind of got messed up here. Got a question, Mr. Fuller, from the chat. From Mr. Reed says, Mr. Fuller, do you think friendly competition can be constructive for non-whites, or should non-whites avoid being in competition with each other at all costs?
Cooperation. We should get rid of that word, competition. Competing. You're not competing. What do you need that for? What do you need to compete for? Cooperation. That's a much smoother operation. Competing means being combative. We shouldn't be looking for any kind of combat with anybody for any reason. We're going to have to do something to get where it's necessary to get. That's why we have the war section and the counter-war section in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. It's going to take some of that, but you minimize it as much as you possibly can. No kind of conflict at all. Never a discouraging word. Everything is going to be uplifting. And we'll find that once we get used to it just a little bit, it will be fun. We have been taught that fun means being destructive, being combative. That's fun. That's why when black people even talked about sports and getting into sports, what did they give us the first off right from the beginning? What was the sport that black people were allowed in more than anything? Not baseball, which is competitive, or football, which is combative and whatnot. Certainly not golf. But it was boxing, which never should have been in the first place and shouldn't exist now. I'm going to say that again. That so-called sport called boxing, where you deliberately, people all dressed up and people all, drinking beer and cheering and whatnot, when you see somebody staggering around in a ring, in a boxing ring they call it, fixing to fall down from being punched in the head, that is crazy. It always has been. But we are not taught that that's the way it is.
We're not taught
we say that's a legitimate sport.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Before I get to ITES's email, that was for Wayne from Denmark, that was the Congo Conference of 1884-1885 under Bismarck, and there were 14 countries that participated in the dividing up of Africa. You may want to look that up. That's very important because they kept it out of the history books. Another thing they kept out of the history books, Mr. Fuller just mentioned Jackie Robinson, and they told you that he was the first to enter into the major leagues. That's what they told us, and we believed that for a long time. Well, okay, but check out this person that was before Jackie Robinson that was in the major leagues. His name, Moses Fleetwood Walker. Check that out and see what you think. Okay, let's see here. Let's go. By the way, Mr. Fuller, Darrell says thank you for answering his questions. And I must say that the usual suspects are on the line because I can see a little bit, so that's okay. Okay, ITES says this, Mr. Fuller. He said, in the system of racism, is it possible to have a white friend?
I guess, if the white supremacists decide that, I guess, but it's of no
what does
real
the code say?
It's of no real consequence because the system is still in place. So white people who will come around and say, me as an individual, I'd like to be your friend, try to talk to other white people. And then another thing that white people are going to have to seriously think about, and which they have seriously thought about because they're serious people. What do black people have to offer? That's what I think about when I see people, black and white, marching down the street with signs, all of them saying Black Lives Matter. But at a certain point, and I know black people who are really thinking have to be thinking about this. Okay, so you walked up and down the street all over the world, Black Lives Matter. But now when a white person actually looks at the average black person, what is the logical question that white person would ask? What is it that I can do with this person that would help me to improve myself? What does this black person have to offer me as a white person that I don't already have more than enough of? And I have asked that question, trying to look at it from the white side. And everybody on the planet should be thinking about it because this is serious business after all the hoopla dies down right now. Because I think it just may turn out to be worse than it was before on account of people are dodging that question. What is it that a black person, the average black person, has to offer the great white world that they don't already have more than enough of? And the answer that I came up with is absolutely nothing. Because we don't have anything that they don't already have, including ourselves as black people. They already have us. So what do we have to offer that they're not already getting plenty of in economics, in education, in entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war? It's 9 areas of activity. It's nothing that the white supremacists of this planet do not have more than enough of, and that black people have none of it that's of any value that I can see, including our sexuality. They've been getting plenty of that, like forever. So having black females come out and do what we've been shown to do best, shaking our behinds, and the increasing number of black males out there shaking his, okay, they'd already have that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do black people have to really offer when they say Black Lives Matter? The average white person would take a look at black people in all our hairdos and tattoos and whatever else we can add on and say, now, what am I going to get out of this? Is there anything that these people have that I need that I don't already have plenty of? Every black person has thought about that in the back of their minds, but we refuse to think about it because it hurts. We just say, well, black and white together, and we got to settle these things and get rid of racism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Racism is evil. But the average white person says, I get rid of racism. What do you got to offer me as a black person right this minute? Show me something that you have that I don't already have more than enough of, including domination over you. And if I don't dominate you anymore, what do you have to offer me if we're even, Steven? I can offer you a lot of things because everything that you have ever wanted is something that I have.
Something
but
that
what can you offer me? Well, I can beat a drum. Negro, I know about drums. I give you some of the drums to beat. So don't start talking about no drums. Well, I got some kente cloth. Well, I got plenty of that if I want it. Name something, black person. Name one thing. Just one. Well, I got soul. Oh, so what am I going to do with your soul?
Okay. Thank you, Robert Smothers, for joining the chat room. Everybody else, particularly those who are listening, you are listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am the co-host, Mr. Bobby. Now, to get in contact with the show, call 516-453-9921, and be sure to press the number 1 button so that my producers and the call screeners can get your name and I can properly introduce you in the rotation that we have. Yes, that guy, that first player in the baseball, they told you it was Jackie Robinson. Somebody asked. Try Moses Fleetwood Walker. Look that up. Anyway, going to the Gmails, this comes from Black Speak. Mr. Fuller, whites see racism as a singular concept rather than a concept of racism, white supremacy. Mr. Fuller, is it logical to always refer to the term as white supremacy, racism, white supremacy?
Yes, that's my choice. Now, if somebody wants to call it something else here, according to the code, you can do that under VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. you're qualified to call it anything you want to call it. But then the question is raised, why call it something else? What is the best thing to call it? That's another question. So if you have a suggestion about what to call it, I've heard people say, call it prejudice, call it bigotry. I looked at all those terms, and I decided it's best to call it what it is, because other terms can be confusing. Call it white supremacy. White people who have chosen to be supreme over non-white people in every area of activity 24/7 throughout the entire planet and, by extension, the entire universe, and who have actually done that. It's not a theory. It's an actuality. It's nowhere, according to all the evidence, that the white people who believe in dominating and mistreating people of color, is nowhere that doesn't have prevalence. Now, early in this program, someone mentioned some island, but
yeah,
they say, well, they don't. Yes, but I'm saying they have dominance over that island. It's just that they don't choose to do anything with it at this particular time. It's a lots of dark-skinned people who have never seen a white person, except maybe in a picture. But the white supremacists are dominant over them too, wherever they are, simply because they know where they are, and they know what to do with them if they want to do something with them. And something is mentioned about, well, the people drive them off with their spears and arrows. Not really, because the white supremacists don't really even have to go that route. They can just simply drop off a few things from boats.
Or use direct energy. Use direct energy.
Well, no, I'm saying they can enter without firing a shot of any kind, without taking any type of their weapons, which they have plenty of, but they can just fly an airplane over there and just drop a few things that they manufacture and let the people get used to having these things being dropped to them, so that little by little they become dependent upon them. They'll find out that there are some tools that the white supremacists have they've never seen before. So they're going to use them.
Okay.
Once they find out how to use them, and the next thing you know, they'll always be looking up at the sky. You know, like black people do anyway, looking up at the sky, you know, that heaven is going to rain something down on me. Okay? Heaven is in the form of the great white father and the great white mother. Always.
Okay. All righty. Let's do this. Let me see here. Okay. Here we go. We have another Bill on the line. Bill, we got you. You're worldwide to speak with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Yes, Mr. Fuller. I was wondering, could you speak toward some of the issues of interest between black males and black females in the under the area of sex, in terms of black males and females who are attracted to one another? What are some productive suggestions for thought, speech, and action in ways that they can interact between one another? And then, secondly,
let me ask one question. Yeah, let me answer the first question, please, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, if I understand the question, it means we have to have a new interaction altogether. To start with, one right out of the gates I can think of, there's a lot of them under the area of sex, the 8th area of activity in the textbook, suggestions. But one is an absolute that should happen right this minute and forever from now on. First time, last time. In other words, that black male should never strike, use physical force of any kind, except in self-defense, the black female. Ever under any circumstance other than direct self-defense. In other words, defense of his entire existence. That's the only reason. But in anger or anything like that, or having a dispute, or dominating her in that way, telling her that she is subordinate to him, when he is subordinate to racist man and racist woman, that is vile. That is not logical at all. We are all equal prisoners of war, male and female. So, first time, last time. Now, there's some of us who are going to do it. I mean, as of this minute while I'm speaking. But what that should mean before it happens, the female should let that male know, if you ever strike me, deliberately, in anger about anything that I have said or done, this so-called arrangement, relationship, or whatever you want to call it, is over. Period. Just one time. That's all it takes. Because, see, that one time, if I let you slide with that one, it's going to come again. Then it's going to be 5 or 6 times. That's got to stop. You're not authorized to do that. You don't have the authority to do that. Where did you get that kind of authority over me? When we are both under the authority of racist man and racist woman. You have no business putting your hands on me except when I want you to. Period. Now that should be clear, loud and clear, throughout the entire planet Earth, so that the word gets around real quick. As of this moment, black males do not strike black females, period, except in direct self-defense. Like, just suddenly she just jumps up and starts swinging an axe or something. Then he has to do what he has to do if he can't get away from her. To say that she did this or said that or talk back to him, and he strikes her like she is his slave, when he is a slave himself under racist man and racist woman, absolutely not. Under any circumstance other than direct self-defense. No. You sit down and talk it out. And if you can't talk it out, you just agree to disagree.
Okay, and quickly, Bill.
And make arrangements to get away from each other.
Okay, quickly,
because
Bill.
If it comes to that striking stuff, that means it's over anyway. So you might as well just understand that in front. Hit her one time, and that's an announcement. This interaction is over. From now on, you and me are parted forever. No coming back. Just one time. That's all it takes.
Okay.
No making up. Not going to be into that. None of that forgiveness stuff and all that. None of that lost my temper. No, none of that.
No.
It just doesn't happen. Not ever supposed to happen.
Quickly, Bill, before we go to a break, your second question, quickly.
Yes, could you explain the concept of affection versus the concept of love?
We're in the break. Didn't mean to do that, but I'll tell you what, we'll have Mr. Fuller answer that right after this. I was trying to get it in before that. My mistake on that. Okay, you're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., who is taking your questions and answering them as he can, according to the code. Get in contact with the show, 516-453-9921. Be sure to press the number 1 button and give your name to the call screener, and that'll make everybody happy. Also, if you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can do it by Gmail. The numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY@gmail.com. It will not be read today, but at some point it will be read, and I will notify you when it is read, date, and time. Again, you're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. right here, the Counter Racist Code Show. Okay, Bill, could you ask your second question again, please, sir?
Yes, Mr. Fuller, I would like you to address and explain the codified concept of love versus the concept of affection.
Oh, the concept of love. That's an overworked term. I've gotten to the place, well, I can't make it personal, so that word is thrown around like it's nothing. That's a very strong word. Black people talk about love. Love, 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 love. They ain't got none of it. None of it. I mean, even when we think we have it, we're coming nowhere close. Why? Because of the compensatory codified definition. Because nobody comes close to that. Nobody knows anything about love, white people or non-white people. We don't know the first thing about that thing called love. Why? Because love, according to the code, has the same definition as the word justice, the compensatory definition, which means what? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, that doesn't exist anywhere on the planet here in 2020 and probably has never existed anywhere on the planet in recorded history or pre-recorded history. The thing called love, which is the same as justice, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's the compensatory definition for the word justice, which is the same as the compensatory definition for the word love. They are one and the same. You can't have love without justice. What we call love just hugging somebody or sexual intercourse. That's how it's defined in many dictionaries. Making love. That's not what you're making. That's sexual intercourse. That doesn't have anything to do with love. No connection at all. That's an instinct. But we have been taught that everything is love. I love you. I love you. Come here and give me a hug. And then 15 minutes later, you're fighting.
You're fighting.
Goes on all the time. We just throw that word around like it's nothing. And so the word has become nothing. When I hear people talking about love, black people or white people, it sounds silly because the term has become silly. It's just absolutely silly. That's a sacred word because justice is sacred.
Yes.
Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. It has never happened in recorded history.
Wow.
So that's rare. Love is not something, you just stand up and say, I love you, and you loves me back, and so we got plenty of love. I mean, even the way that grandmothers use it, we got no concept of love because we got no concept of justice that we can use, that anybody's used as a practical example because it's never existed. We need it. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. You better believe it. But nobody has ever seen it because it's never happened. We don't know how corrupt we really are compared to the way that we ought to be, which is what codification is all about. Getting to be something that nobody has ever been.
All right. Bill, don't be a stranger. Thank you for your call. Really appreciate that. Okay. Before we move to Ishmael, there was a comment made about the Sentinel Islands, and you mentioned something about they could get to them anytime they want to. One of the things that I mentioned was direct energy or directed energy, which is a weapon. Is a weapon, ranged weapon that damages its target with highly focused energy, including laser, microwaves, and particle beams. Potential applications of this technology include weapons that target personnel, missiles, vehicles, and optional devices. Now, for more information on that, if you'd like to look that up, and I would think that you would want to reference things, Wikipedia has a good example, but there is a such thing as called directed or direct energy. And I will not tell you some of the applications that it's been used on, but yeah, it is real. Okay, let's go to Ishmael. Ishmael, if I can get you up here. Okay, Ishmael, you're heard worldwide. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. My question, Mr. Fuller, is a few weeks ago I asked you what was the most constructive thought or action that you have undertaken in your life to get you the most constructive results, and you told me it was truth. My question will follow that, and the question is to always be truthful in all actions, or to be the most truthful you can be. It requires you to be having the most knowledge on a situation, whatever you're trying to speak about or act upon. What is the course of study that you would suggest that can allow a person to reach the highest level of purity that they can always act on in the best truthful way possible?
Truth is, by definition, that which is. That's a compensatory definition for truth. Just 3 words. That which is. That which is what? Is whatever it is. Finding out what something is. If you see a strange animal, like many animals, I saw a TV program just the other day where some people in some mines, what had been a gold mine, a couple of miles deep under the earth, and they went down and they found some water there, and they say where there's water, there's life. So they found some worms there in that water, microscopic worms, I think, if I recall correctly. Just saw this on television a couple of days ago. So they are examining these worms because they've never seen that species of worm before. Said the worm shouldn't even, under those conditions, under that type of heat, up under the earth, even in water, those worms shouldn't even exist. They should be dead. But that's their environment. They thrive in that environment. And they say it's a species they never saw before. Now, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the word truth. Find out the truth. So they're going to study these worms and study to see, first of all, how did they get there? And why are they there now after all these thousands and thousands of years? They say it goes way back into the millennia that species of worm has survived in these kind of conditions under the earth, never coming to the surface, and that, what are they? What are they there for? What do they do? What is their connection with the rest of the environment? Are there other species there, which they did find some that weren't worms? There were some type of other creatures that they gave names to. So what are they doing? They're discovering what? What is true, which the white supremacists of this planet are the best, the most audacious people, you might say, the people who are more interested in doing something like that than anybody. They want to know the truth about everything, and that is a source of their power too. Black people just want to know just enough, to get through the day.
Yeah.
And we don't want to know. We'll whole pile of sand. I mean, without ever thinking about examining a grain of sand and seeing if one grain is different from another, and if so, why?
Yeah.
How many black people think like that? Just about zero.
All righty. Ishmael, thank you for your call. Do not be a stranger to the program. We appreciate it. Mr. Fuller, Wayne, thank you, Wayne, from Denmark. Denmark is listening. Wanted to make this comment when I mentioned about the Berlin conference. He said, by the way, Denmark had sold the Virgin Islands to the U.S. for $25 million in gold coin in 1917. And then he said it must be considerably more, worth more now. Maybe so. Maybe so, Wayne. But thank you for listening from Denmark. And Lala, said Mr. Fuller, she said thank you for answering her question, those three questions that you did. She was very pleased with your answers, so we wanted to do that. And Aaron from Spain, I believe it was, the concept called Spain, wanted to know, Mr. Fuller, will your website, producejustice.com, be accepting internet calls, and do you think the production team can inquire about this, accepting internet calls? So I don't know anything about that, Mr. Fuller. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Aaron, you're listening in Spain. Mr. Fuller doesn't know, and I don't know. Maybe Mr. Gatewood could find out that information about internet calls. I don't know, but it could be something to look into. I'm not sure about that. Mr. Fuller and I, we just basically speak about his book, and then he answers your phone calls. And speaking about that, Mr. Fuller, since we're near this time, why don't we do this before we go to the next Gmail? Thank you, Transident, if I got it correctly. Thank you for your participation in the chat room. Mr. Fuller, it's time to speak about your book that we can get by going to Produce Justice, and it is up, according to my brothers, the Gatewood brothers. They let me know that it is up and running, so no problems with that. But speak about your book, Mr. Fuller.
You can get the book by going to producejustice.com. producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the basic textbook and an additional volume to the basic textbook called the Compensatory Counter Races Codified Word Guide. And they're basically the same book. I always say one problem, one book. But I couldn't crowd everything into the same volume. At some point in the future, I'd like to do that. I'd like for it to just be one book and not one book in two volumes.
Ooh, that'd be a big book.
Right, but I've seen books that, both of them together come to about 1,000 pages, roughly. But I've seen books with more than 1,000 pages that weren't all that thick. So it comes down to the print. If you look at some books on a shelf, if you have a bookshelf with a lot of books on them, and some of them are pretty thick, just look at some of them. Some of them have more than 1,000 pages. I have one book that has most of Mark Twain's work in that one book, one volume.
Okay.
Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, and a couple of other books that he wrote. And it's all in one book. And so it can be done. It's just a matter of me, knowing enough about technology to have somebody figure out how to do it. I'd like to have it in one volume. But you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. And in that book are suggestions about what to do about the system of white supremacy if you are a victim of it. That's what the book is written for. The individual victim. You don't have to join an organization. We got organizations out here that you can join. and there'll probably be more. But this is for the individual victim who finds him or herself alone in most situations, which most situations you are alone, and what to do and what to not do, what to say and what to not say. And that's what the book is about, under all of these conditions that will work against racism and for justice. That's what the book is about. Go to producejustice.com.
All righty. The show is taking on an international flavor. Let me do this. Let me go to Estelle. I was going to go to Anthony, but in England. But let me go to Estelle, and then I need to ask you a question, Mr. Fuller. Okay, Estelle, we have you on worldwide. Go ahead. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a question. I have a question here that's on page 298. It has to do with the area of sex.
298.
298.
Okay.
I won't go over all the bullet points, but the bullet point that was puzzling to me was Neely Fuller has here, during the meeting, both agree to appear, present themselves to each other completely naked, all parts of each other's bodies completely uncovered. And this comes prior to the 200 or so questions. Would you be able to explain about the being naked part, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, because people should be familiar with each other before they ever have sexual intercourse. Now, that's a suggestion that a whole lot of people won't agree with, particularly a lot of people of certain religious persuasions worldwide. And many religions have been around for, 1,000 years or more, and even before they were even recorded as religions. And they have sex laws in most religions. And most religions that I know about would not agree with that approach at all. Of course, some tribal religions, people don't wear any clothes to start with. I mean, depending on where they are, but they are not the prevalent number, population-wise, here on the planet Earth. A lot of people in their, I guess some tribes, the people don't have on any clothes, just as a normal condition. But I'm talking about in most modern societies, people do have some type of covering of private parts. But I'm saying even the private parts should be exposed. People should be completely familiar with each other, male with female, before they engage in the first act of sexual intercourse. No surprises of any
And this
kind.
would be during the question answering time?
Or it can be at any time. It can be at any time. But they have to at least have answered some questions in order to get to that stage where they're willing to see each other with no clothes on. Okay? Not clothed at all. But they're not engaging in sexual intercourse at all. They're just exposed to each other, because the concept is there should be no such thing as I didn't know between any people who are engaging in sexual intercourse. That should never come up. I didn't know. If I had known, I never would have gotten involved with you. If I had known that you had done this, if I had known that you had done that, if I had known that you were this type of person, if I had known that you had that type of temper that you have, if I had known that you are very casual about everything that you do, you're never serious about nothing. If I had known, I didn't know. If I had known, I wouldn't have done this with you. I wouldn't have believed you if I had known that you lie like that. I never would have tied up with somebody that just tell one lie right after another. Never tell the truth. If I had known, or I didn't know. Those are the things you keep hearing from people all the time. But the code says All of that should be eliminated before you ever make a trip to the bedroom. Now, that's something that wasn't always in the code, but that's the conclusion I came to. Mm-hmm. I keep hearing people say, well, why did you all break up? Well, I didn't know that, I didn't know she had that kind of temper, man. I never would have gotten, and then she's saying, oh, I didn't know that he, had 4 families. I mean, before he met me. And, owes on all those children he's got. I mean, my goodness. He's a nice guy, but my goodness. I thought he was wonderful in every other way. But, I mean, he's been wonderful with too many people, and he didn't tell me. If I had known that, I never would have got involved in this mess. I didn't know. The code says there shouldn't be anything that you don't know about that person, right from the time they were born.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Estelle.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, Mr. Bobby.
And
right.
You're welcome, and don't be a stranger there. Okay, Mr. Fuller, this is international flavor here from England. Anthony McKinn says this. He says this is on how to refer to suspected racist and eclectic pluralism. If a suspected white supremacist refers to himself as a white nationalist, according to the code, can I still refer to him as a suspected white racist? The reason why I'm asking is because I am in the process of writing a book, and I wish to refer to a so-called white nationalist as a suspected white supremacist. Mr. Fuller? Okay, Mr. Fuller? I wonder what happened there. See if we can get Mr. Fuller back here. Yeah, see if we can get Mr. Fuller back here. While we're efforting to get Mr. Fuller back here, let's do this. Mr. Mackin also has asked this question. He has asked this question here. I refer to myself as an eclectic pluralist, but could you shed some more light on eclectic pluralism? What is it, how it works, and why you came up with that concept? Please refer to page 99 of the Word Guide. Okay, as we are efforting to get Mr. Fuller back here, I don't know what happened to Mr. Fuller here. Maybe my producers can get Mr. Fuller back here. But he is, Brother McKinn is from England, and he was asking those questions, and I cannot and will not answer for Mr. Fuller. I can't. I'm speaking now because we are efforting to get Mr. Fuller back online, since we have about 6 minutes of the show left. But I cannot answer for him. But that's a good question. If anybody knows what an eclectic pluralist is, hit me up in the chat room so that I can continue on with the show as we try to get Mr. Fuller back in here, because I cannot pause in the middle of the show to do it. Yeah, that would not be good. Okay, let's see, eclectic pluralism. Anybody out there know what eclectic pluralism is? If you do know, hit me up on that. What is eclectic pluralism? Yeah, what is eclectic pluralism? Yeah, that's what we want to know.
According to WordPress.
How about this?
The Church of Eclectic Pluralism, a compensatory functional religion based on the principles derived from two or more systems of religion, from page 253 of the United Independent Compensatory Code by Neely Fuller Jr.
Okay, well, let's go to page 253. as we are still efforting to get Mr. Fuller. Okay, I'm looking at page 253, and I'm looking for eclectic pluralism. I don't see it on here. Okay. Somebody asked a question here on page 253. What is the correct thing to say when someone says that they're trying to end racism, white supremacy, and is not important as doing other things? And Mr. Fuller has written in his book that the answer is speaking and or acting with the intention of ending racism, white supremacy, is necessary in order to give constructive meaning to any of the following activities. Let me go over some of these activities, again, as we're trying to get Mr. Fuller back. Acquiring great amount of money, attending church, temple, mosque, simple, etc., being a lawmaker, being a success, celebrating. Yeah, celebrating. Did you celebrate the 4th? I know I don't. Choosing a mate or marriage, which we just had a call about that in finding out all the necessary information that you can about that person and asking questions. Maybe being naked before then. Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it can't
I
get you
thought I got
on.
a signal. I thought I got a signal that the show was over.
No.
Okay, all right, I'm here.
Yeah, well, okay, you need to call the show line, because I am not on. I'm on the air, but you need to call the show line so people can hear you.
Okay, well, that's what I called it. 1516-453.
Yeah, call that number. Okay.
9921. I call it again? I'm on it now.
Mr. Fuller, they say you're on here. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay. All righty, here we go.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, okay, got you. Yeah, we're on. I don't know what happened over here, but anyway, so happy you're back, and so are the people. Somebody was asking a question about eclectic pluralism. Let me see if I can get this on here. Oh yeah, here it goes. It says, if a suspected white supremacist refers to himself as a white nationalist, according to the code, can I still refer to him as a suspected white supremacist? The reason why I'm asking is because I am in the process of writing a book, and I wish to refer to a so-called white nationalist as a suspected white supremacist.
Yes, you can, because that's your option. See, that's your suspicion. That's your suspicion. You have a suspicion of the person. You're not name calling, and you are saying, I suspect that this person is a white supremacist. As a victim of white supremacy, you have to suspect that somebody is a white supremacist.
Okay.
So you can just simply say that.
Okay.
But you don't actually say that the person is a white supremacist. You never do that unless the person announces that that's what they are.
All righty. And lastly, because we're almost out of time, Anthony is saying from England, he says, I refer to myself as an eclectic pluralist, but could you shed some more light on eclectic pluralism, what it is, how it works, and why you came up with the concept? And please refer to page 99 of the Word Guide. Woo, okay.
Well,
I don't think we have time to do that because we only have about 45 seconds left in the show.
Well, you become an eclectic pluralist simply by saying you're trying to find the true religion.
Okay.
That's what it's about.
You're trying to find the true religion.
Okay,
thank you.
That's what eclectic pluralism is, by definition. Okay. You're trying to find the true religion.
All righty. All right, well, we've come to the end of the show. Bill, tell you what, I got your number on the screen, so you need to call back next week because we ran out of show. Sorry about those technical difficulties. But for everybody else, those that listened, those that called in, those on the chat room, thank you for listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Neely Fuller Jr. and Mr. Bobby. We'll try to do better next week. Everybody, God bless you.